Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to this exclusive webinar with OneReach and Vonage. I'm Kane Sims. I'm your host for today. I'm joined by Tim Holve, who's managing the North American partners at Vonage, and Kevin Frederick, who's managing partner of OneReach.ai. I'm going to introduce the guys in just 1 minute, but today is all about demystifying conversational AI, and these two gentlemen are in just the spot to be able to do that for us. There is a hell of a lot of noise going on in the market right now, and I've probably contributed to some of that in my time over the last 5 years or so. But what we're really trying to do, because of the kind of the noise that exists in the conversational AI and the conversational automation space, customer experience, a lot of vendors over-promising, overselling, and there's just a lot of general kind of fuzziness around. And so for those of you that follow VUX World, a few weeks back, I created a character called Bullshit Man, who is out to really try and kind of like draw attention to some things that might be overly hyped up and may not necessarily be grounded in truth or may not be necessarily feasible. And so this webinar is essentially trying to help you understand fact from fiction, reality from hype, to try and understand what is actually feasible when it comes to implementing conversational AI. And as I said, Tim and Kevin are the two most ideal people to have along that journey. And so by the end of this session, you're going to know what is realistically feasible when it comes to your conversational automation strategy. You're going to find some examples of some of the stuff that might be a bit hypey, might be a bit kind of overinflated, not necessarily grounded in reality. We're going to discuss things like the turnkey solutions that you might see, like off-the-shelf NLU, off-the-shelf assistance. How feasible are those kind of things? We're going to be discussing things around NLU management, dialogue management, and really the four main questions that you should ask any vendor or any partner that you are kind of get involved with and try and take you on this automation journey. So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have everything you need to pull the trigger properly and do it in the right kind of way. But that's enough for me. I'm delighted to introduce Kevin Frederick and Tim. We'll start with you, Tim, from Vonage, managing your partners in North America. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a whistle-stop tour of Vonage, if you can, please.
Sure. Yeah, I head up the API division, also known as CPaaS. A lot of the microservices in the cloud, pretty much anything real-time communications in the cloud, pay-as-you-go, that can be used to build a use case application. And in this case, we do we have a lot of focus on conversational AI. I've been in conversational AI space since late 2017. When I first got involved with a company called Inference, which got bought by Five9. It's the the intelligent virtual agent division of Five9, and I have a real passion for it. I've been in technology for almost all my career. Started out as a product manager launching new products, so I always love to see how new technologies can really change the face of an industry and in the end provide real benefit to the customer.
Nice. And Kevin, tell us about yourself and about OneReach. OneReach doing some very interesting stuff. We had a very good podcast together the last couple of weeks ago, which is incredibly interesting. Tell us about yourself and a little bit about OneReach.
I've got the best job in the world. I spend my days talking about how the OneReach.ai platform can help organizations of all size and shape deliver on the promise of accelerating their journey towards hyperautomation. So the platform team here at OneReach does a great job making me look good, and I get to have a lot of fun engaging with partners, prospective customers, analyst communities, you name it.
Nice, that sounds good. And so let's maybe get into the meat of the discussion, I suppose, then, because we were talking beforehand. And by the way, if you're tuning in, feel free to use the Q&A box. There's a Q&A box on your right-hand side. If you've got any questions throughout this discussion, stick your questions in there. Don't save them till the end. Just stick them in there. If the time is right, we'll bring them forward. If not, we can save them to the end. But the more interactive we can be, the better. So feel free to stick some questions in there. So I suppose one of the things that we should really demystify is starting from the very beginning about the whole concept of conversational AI in general. I think there's actually a bit of confusion in the marketplace and in the industry generally about what conversational AI even is. I've been tagged in a lot of posts recently, which is and I had to write a response to all of this in the VUX World newsletter, which was the difference between conversational AI and chatbots. And, so there just seems to be a bit of a lack of understanding, I suppose, within the kind of industry around what exactly is conversational AI in the first place. And so, Kevin, you spend a lot of time, as you said, talking to customers, talking to prospective clients, talking to people who are looking to utilize this technology. How would you define conversational AI as a start point?
It's the creation of intelligent digital workers that are able to do really two primary things. The first is to converse on any channel in any language. And the second is to perform work. So that digital worker might be making decisions. So there's decisioning logic and decisioning algorithms as part of it. But then there's task completion. So instead of just understanding that somebody wants to reset their password and giving them a link and wishing them luck to go do that somewhere else, conversational AI is able to actually perform the password reset. And so as you start to unpack those two key themes, you find there's a lot more to it than just the natural language understanding and speech recognition that a lot of people assume are synonymous with conversational AI.
Interesting. And we've got a relevant question here from Pete straight away, which is what I like to see. Keep them coming. If you do have these kind of questions, keep them coming. So Tim, Pete's asking, is a chatbot and conversational AI the same thing?
Well, in my opinion, a chatbot, the word bot sort of devalues a true conversational AI experience with an intelligent virtual agent, which is supposed to do something, know what you want to do it on your behalf and do it well in place of a human, and saving, in rudimentary tasks. So a human is saved for those real high value, really unique situations. And so to me, a chatbot is a little bit different than conversational AI because I've not really had a conversation with a chatbot. Usually when I have a conversation, I can get so far with text, but it's really voice. To me, conversational AI is all about voice and being able to communicate and have a conversation to have the other side, in this case, the intelligent virtual agent, understand your intent and then execute the intent for you in a very quick manner. So it gets it done. A lot of times chatbots are more word spotting. They spot words and assume that, you say one word and they think, oh, that's what you want to do. But if you have two words that could be an action, it sometimes gets confused and doesn't know what to do.
I kind of described it in this article I was talking about as a chatbot basically is kind of just describing almost a channel. Most of the time when people talk about chatbots, they're really talking about those little widgets that you get on websites. Now, what that chatbot does, whether it's very basic and uses keyword recognition, as you said, Tim, whether it's more sophisticated and actually helps you get jobs done, as you described, Kevin, it really is besides the point. The chatbot is just the thing that you interact with. The conversational AI side of it, at least this is the point I'd make in this article, and I'd be interested in getting both your opinions on it. The conversational AI part of it is almost the stuff that sits underneath it. Kevin, you mentioned potentially speech recognition, natural language understanding. You mentioned automating business processes. You mentioned more sophisticated dialogue management, greater ability to be able to identify needs and help people get stuff done. So I don't know whether you would concur with that analogy of a chatbot being essentially just either a channel or a front end, whereas the conversational AI part is all about the smarts behind the scenes. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I think you nailed it. It's that presentation layer. It's that surface. It's what you can see is often thought of as a chatbot. And I think that maybe is why it's such a common mistake that's where development efforts are focused. And instead of realizing that, there's a lot more capability throughout the rest of the conversational AI portfolio, right? All of the decision logic and being able to use both linguistics and extra linguistics, such as context and tone, to further, enhance an experience. And so maybe just to simplify it, that chatbot, as you described it, Kane, the little thing that pops up on the website, maybe it's helpful to think of that as one way to access the conversational AI. and that the brains behind the scenes can be accessed other ways as well. That same brain, you might want to call and talk to that brain. You might want to get on a different messaging platform like Slack or Microsoft Teams or WhatsApp and have a similar exchange with all of that back-end logic. And so what you see is only a small portion of really what's been developed and deployed. There's some interesting, I think, maybe concepts here though to look at, and we're at OneReach, we're sponsoring a study right now to really understand this better. But different parts of the human brain are triggered when you're using language. It's a very powerful part of your brain. We have our own neural nets, and it's this magical, wonderful gift that we all have to be able to converse. But then there's different parts of your brain that are used when you're navigating something visually. It's more of the geospatial side of your brain, which is still powerful, but less so. And it's also kind of the first thing to go as the human body degrades, right? You start to say things like, oh, where did I put my keys? But you never it's a lot later in that degradation process that you forget how to say, where did I put my keys? And so realizing that, that presentation layer matters a lot lets you think a little more creatively about what should that chatbot do? Should it be reduced to only a text box that you're relying on the written word, or does it make sense to include things like image carousels or map components or drop-down menus that can add a little more richness to that interaction? And when done well, you're able to really design in a human-first way to drive some pretty fantastic business outcomes and user experiences.
I suppose it's a case of using, you mentioned that the kind of natural language understanding part is only sort of 10% or so of the work to be done, sort of thing. Important part, you need to be able to understand people, you need to be able to properly service people's needs. But when you kind of describe that sort of, that next level where you have potentially a whole website that is a conversational interface, and you'll be able to use things that are better displayed visually, like tables, for example, terrible thing to read out in a voice environment, for argument's sake. And so you're essentially shaping and molding all of the different tools that you have to be able to create better experiences, and natural language has been a part of it, which is a really good way of describing it. And I wonder whether, Tim, going back to some of the other points that perhaps need to be sort of demystified, I suppose, is that vision that Kevin's just painted is one of customization, definitely. There isn't really a one-size-fits-all thing here necessarily, because every company is going to have maybe slightly different use cases, different products, different services, different ways of approaching that problem. But yet there's a lot of kind of talk in the marketplace about these kind of turnkey solutions. Just drop this language model in, and you'll have an off-the-shelf assistant, and it will solve all of your problems, and we can deploy it in 20 days and all that kind of stuff. What have you noticed, Tim? Is that true? Is it kind of feasible to take something off the shelf like that, plonk it in, and off you go? You're away to the races, or is there a little bit more to it than that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little more to it than that. Sure, there's certain modules that you can use between use cases, but to download a chatbot and expect it to give you the use case interaction specific to your industry is asking a bit much. I think it's going to need some customization. Everybody does business in a certain way. Everybody has a different type of customer journey they would like their customers to go through, which is obviously the best possible. So you're going to need some level of customization. It's just like, I keep going back to the food analogy. We go to the food analogy, and that to really create this world-class, world-renowned dish, you need really good ingredients and a master chef to prepare it. And the preparation is going to be unique to each individual, or in this case, use case or company, and the interaction they want their customers to have with their company. So, yeah, I mean, you can only go so far. You just can't drop it in and go. You're going to need some customization.
It seems like that might be the biggest overpromise that there is, is that you can just buy this off the shelf, plug it in, and it's going to work.
That along with, conversational AI is just having one number and someone's answers it, an intelligent virtual agent answers, how can I help you today? And they can do everything you want, which that's overselling, because just the amount of intents and data to go with anything that could possibly happen and that what do you want to do today can be unmanageable. Pare it down.
What is it that sorry, go on, Kevin.
I just want to, like, Tim, that's such a good example, right? The prompt of how can I help you today? And in the back, it says, I sure hope they ask for one of these three things, because that's all I can do. So it turns into this guessing game of, so like, oh yeah, I need to transfer some funds. Oh yeah, I can't do that. Guess again. You know, is there something else I can help with? Or let me get you straight to an agent, right? And so that's a really good example of how, you know, you're just setting the wrong expectation with the end user out of the gate, and why so many of these chatbots that we've all experienced at this point are so unsatisfying. And I think the good news is our hypothesis is that we'll all look back on this period of time and giggle and laugh and say, do you remember that we actually let people go live with these silly little toys? But I think that's, you know, it's a journey, and hopefully we'll get through that phase pretty quickly.
I think we're already beginning to laugh at it today, to be honest. But I think that it's a symptom, I think, of people kind of, they take what they believe they can do. In that instance, let's call it like mortgages and loans. This is what we do, and this is a quote, to quote Alan Nickel. We do mortgages and we do loans. These are the two things that we can do, and as a customer, you should identify yourself as such, rather than just trying to understand what people are trying to get to and working back from the customer need. Because just because you just do mortgages and loans and someone comes to you saying, I'm thinking of downsizing, doesn't necessarily mean that they're looking for a mortgage. It might mean that they're trying to find a way of cutting down their monthly spend, and that they might want to talk about maybe porting over their mortgage or something completely different, you know? And so it's symptomatic, I think, sometimes of a bit of an insular mentality where we start with what we know and what we think we can do, and we try and cram people's experience into what we've decided they can already do. Don't know if you kind of concur with that.
We were at a conference. This was, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, and we had T-shirts on that said, "Can I text your contact center?" And we were at a cocktail party, and there was a woman who had plenty to drink, and from an inappropriate distance away, she's like, Of course you can't. That's crazy. And so I remember walking over, and it turns out she was the head of contact center for a major retail brand that we would all recognize by name. And I remember walking over and saying, what's your toll-free number? And she tells it to me. And I'd sent a text message to that number. And I said, you can't stop anyone from doing this. They're probably already doing this. You just don't know. You're not listening. And her face drained, right? And it was such a good example of the brand thinking that they're in control of the customer journey, instead of recognizing that the end users are on a journey. It's our job to reveal the journey that they're on, and hopefully to influence that in a really positive way. But we don't get to decide these things. You know, the second you put a text box or a phone number on a website, people are going to call, people are going to ask questions. You've invited them to do that. So now there's some responsibility to handle that in a thoughtful way.
And that ties into the off-the-shelf ready to go, is that off-the-shelf ready to go assumes certain human behavior, and you can't dictate human behavior. And a lot of companies,
even something simple like resetting a password. You know, it's a very popular use case. There's a ton of, you know, back-end process or kind of drag and weight associated with, you know, having to reset people's passwords. And so it tends to be some pretty low-hanging fruit. Like, we should automate that. And that's correct. You should. But this idea that a vendor could say, oh yeah, we have that. Just download this and plug it in and it starts working is so disingenuous to what actually needs to happen. But if we go back to the framework of these digital workers can converse and do work. The converse part, there are commodity language models that you can plug in that have a bunch of utterances for how people might say, I want to reset my password. And sure, a lot of that's reusable. The problem is that doesn't get you anywhere near the goal line, which is being able to actually reset the password, right? That the business logic for who gets to reset their password and when, how do we want to deal with authentication? Does that change based on the user type or the system that they're trying to log into? There's an incredible complexity that comes with these things that has to be done in a thoughtful way. And so I see a question here in the Q&A about, no code versus low code. If you had to program using traditional software development methodologies, all of that logic that I just described, first of all, it's going to take you a long time. Second of all, it's going to be a lot less flexible to change. And third, once that password's reset, that doesn't mean the conversation's over. They might say, great, now that I'm in my account, why is my balance $300 less than I thought it would be? And then what are you going to do, right? Now you're back into the, let me connect you to a human type of workflow. So lots to unpack there, but hopefully that gives everyone kind of some framing for how to think about how even the hard stuff has some complexity embedded within it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, sorry, go on, Tim.
I was say Kevin hit kind of a point that takes us into another direction. We don't have to go there, but that is, we have to be willing to give up the self-service session and get someone to a live agent before they get frustrated. And a lot of times we're not willing to do that. We just want to stick with it. I'm sorry, can you repeat? I'm sorry, can you repeat? And there's a great, I think it's Burnstown. There's speech recognition in an elevator comedy skit, right? The Scottish guys in the accent, classic example of that. Classic. And I've even noticed when I call in sometimes, I know the automated system and I know when I don't have an option there for me. So I just go in and try to hit 0, or as they're going through it, I'll say agent, representative, agent, and it won't even recognize that anymore. And that makes me do something amongst the options it has available.
Well, and there's another question here about, as an African in the UK, most of these systems I interact with don't understand, what I'm saying. So what's being done about inclusivity and accent management? It's another great example, right? Password reset, people all around the world, regardless of location or language or dialect, need to reset passwords. But if you have only one NLU, natural language understanding system, available to you, you are now beholden to only supporting the languages and dialects that platform can't support. It's another big mistake that we see people make is adopting a single vendor mentality instead of an open architecture. And so as these tools become more prominent and well adopted, the diversity of the user base increases. So the obligation to support different languages and dialects increases. And the only way to support that growing breadth of diversity is to have lots of different cognitive tools on your tool belt and being able to use the right one at the right time. So it's no longer just which one's best, it's which one's best for this person right now. And by the way, the industry is changing quickly. So how might that be different when this person calls in again tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah. Great example.
Sorry, Tim, I just want to go to some of the companies that would be claiming to build their own solutions. Would argue that that's the value of building your own solution, is that you can, for Cola's example, if there's a certain African language that a certain speech recognition provider caters for, and you want to launch something in that country, that geography, then you can just switch that out. And typically the way that people have done that is that they've kind of built their own solutions. And so you would take an NLU from somewhere and speech recognition from somewhere, but inevitably you need to stitch that all together. So your dialogue management might be just full of code, or you might use something like maybe it's a low code builder that another vendor might provide, but then it doesn't really tie into the NLU and such. And so it ends up becoming a bit messy essentially. one of the, I suppose, going back again to the demystifying conversation, is that you could be led to believe, and this may be the case or not, and this is the idea of the question really, is that a low-code platform is, in theory, a lot more accessible. So we've got another question in here which is talking about, the customer. Is it customer? Oh no, it's where's in the customization realm. Do you think it's headed for accessibility to the average user compared to a technical user? So that should be the benefit of a low-code environment, is that it increases the accessibility of the number of people that can work on a solution. But then the perceived downside, compared to those that build their own or stitch their own components together, is that you potentially don't get quite as much control over the customer experience, quite as much control over your whole kind of pipeline or flexibility to be able to do whatever you want to do. So I'm wondering, Kevin, your kind of thoughts on, are there limitations to low-code platforms, or do you think actually that low-code platforms is the best option for everybody in all cases?
The low-code platforms come in two categories. One is where the low-code interface is really configuring against some predefined back-end capability, and therefore you're limited to what that back-end capability can do. So the criticism of low-code being less flexible is true. The other category of low-code builders are those that are actually creating standalone software applications as the output. So in that case, you're actually building and writing software using, instead of a traditional IDE, an interface for a developer, you have the same output, but your IDE, your development environment, is drag and drop. And that allows for someone who's not a traditional developer to create software that is higher quality and faster than what a traditional developer can do using their traditional tools.
Interesting.
So,
where do you see that?
Go
on.
Yeah, there's a whole number of implications to this. And so, you might see memes online about developers going through job interviews and they have a coding test and they just, go online and get a code snippet and put it in and, and they're done. But there's some magic to that. Like why create something from scratch if you don't have to? And one of the big benefits of low-code tools and no-code tools is you can actually productize the best practice and deploy that as a building block that can then be dragged and dropped. And now someone who's not a developer, who might not have even known what the best practice is using the best practice because they started with, the right component that was designed for that specific use.
Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting. So, Tim, there's a question here which I think we'll come to. The specific question we'll come to in a moment, but it does lend itself to another question which I think is related to the hype potentially, which is solutions that are self-training, self-governed, self-learning, and almost self-managed. So I won't name names, but there was things released recently where machine learning models are in this particular environment training themselves, getting better on their own, and developing and enhancing the solution without any kind of human oversight. What do you think is the reality of those situations? Are we heading into a world where these solutions are improving over time, or is there always going to be something required from a human standpoint in that case?
That's a great question. That's probably that $64,000 question that you can debate for forever. But yeah, there's absolutely machine learning and at teaching themselves, to a certain extent. For example, when someone speaks something, it gets converted, the speech gets converted to text, the text gets sent. So that's the process, and it gets sent to an engine for the NLU, the understanding. And the engine come back and said, they would like to buy a rock. And I'm 70% sure. So in that case, yeah, if you get into 50%, you can program it to say, I think you said you wanted a rock. Am I right? And yes. Okay, now, yes, it's teaching itself. But there's elements when ambiguation comes into play, right? And something called disambiguation, and I don't know what to do here. And a human needs to come in and go through and say, you know what? Yes, you were right, or no, you weren't right here. So there's an element of human tuning or teaching that is going to be there. It just depends on what level. So yeah, they can self-learn to a certain point, but I haven't really seen one that, you know, you can just release off on its own. It's like my child in elementary school, right? They learn quickly, but they're not ready for calculus.
Well, Kevin, you had a good example where something similar to this is feasible, whereby when we spoke on the UX World podcast, you were saying that in order to work out what communication preferences people would prefer in an outbound use case, for example, where you're, I don't know, giving somebody an update about their parcel being late delivered or something similar to that you were saying that it's feasible and is being done whereby you can set parameters which would say, okay, try an outbound phone call, try a text message, and then monitor which of those channels get the better response. And then when those responses reach a certain threshold, you can weight the entire system to start acting on those preferences. So it seems as though, in theory, it's feasible to have solutions at least doubling down on areas of effectiveness on their own. I wonder what your thoughts are on this whole self-learning thing.
Yeah, I think a helpful framework is this idea of goal-based design. So when a conversation starts, some sort of intent is revealed, and then the rest of the conversation is how can we get to resolution, right? There's some outcome that we are pursuing. And as you're designing that conversation, you can use rewards-based design thinking, reward-based algorithms to say, I wonder if we are more formal in our language, or if we use emojis, if we'll achieve that goal more quickly and more frequently. So that's an example where if you're using the right tools, you can very easily create that test, and that the system, since it has a goal defined, will reward the options that are more likely to result in the goal being achieved. So that type of thing, it's an interesting mix of, people coming up with hypotheses. Should we use emojis or not? At what point in this conversation should we authenticate the user? These are design decisions that you can essentially decide and then hit run and rely on the system to be doing the calculations in order to understand which of those hypotheses is actually working well. And the most sophisticated users of that type of capability actually come up with success and failure thresholds. So as we run this test on maybe emojis or what channel Kane Sims is more likely to engage with us on, that test may backfire. The goal attainment rate may decrease. And you may be comfortable with a 2% degradation. That's as much risk, as you can afford. You can design this to say, if at any point this system is degrading performance by more than 2%, we're going to revert back to where we were before. So it's a way to put in some guardrails and use some really sophisticated capabilities that you're putting in the hands of non-developers, but doing it in a way that's really responsible.
Nice. We've got a question here from Sam Nanji. Shout out to Sam. People say that intent recognition is at the heart of conversational AI. So Sam's calling that bullshit. You can actually use semantic natural language search to index a pool of content and use that to surface an answer. Google does this quite nicely when you start searching. And also a few other intentless systems kind of do this. Got It AI do something kind of similar. There's others like Vlooper, which use like symbolic AI, which is not based on intents. I'm wondering whether, if we talk about the actual underlying technology here, the natural language understanding part, the bit that gives meaning to sentences so that you can use them effectively to be able to make something happen, is the status quo of that having to be an intent-based system? Does that fly, or is that also bullshit? What do you think, Tim?
Well, just looking at this question, the heart of conversational AI is intent, and really, when you got to step back, the heart of conversational AI is automating talking to a human and getting the same result with the same customer satisfaction. So components of that are intent recognition, right? You do have to understand the intent. Before you get to the intent, you have to be able to understand what the person said properly, right? And that comes into the ASR engines. And then in order to, once you understand the intent, is what, like Kevin says, executing. So they all go hand in hand. So yeah, I mean, a lot of focus is put on intent because that's the major area we're in now, is in recognizing intents. I've talked to some companies who said, yeah, I've tried the how can I help you today, but now we're managing thousands and thousands of intents, and it becomes unmanageable. So, I mean, that's intents is a big piece of it, but it's only a part of it. And so trying to cut through all the different pieces and the noise out there is the more difficult part, which is what we're trying to do, is to keep it to simple things like understanding what they're saying, understanding what they want to do, doing it on their behalf, and doing it well. So an automated interaction is the same as talking to a human and you're a satisfied customer. And that's what we're really trying to accomplish in the end.
Mm. What do you think, Kevin?
I might take a swing at this one. So the question is, or the point is that you can use semantic natural language search to index a pool of content and use that to surface an answer. Google does that well, et cetera, for sure. But if we look at this through the same lens of conversational AI does two things: it converses and performs work. Search is a work item. It's one of the many things that conversational AI can do very well in order to surface an answer. But from the end user perspective, to use the password, the simple example, if I say, I need to reset my password, or I'm locked out of my account, using semantic search to provide an answer is only kind of helpful, right? That design paradigm would present me with some text that says, Kevin, here are the 3 steps to reset your password, and click this link for more. And I think the difference is that conversational AI would respond very differently. And it would say, hey, Kevin, I can help you with that. Let's get started. And it'll do the work with you.
Yeah, and even the search itself is, you have to think about, okay, what's it searching? Is it a credible source of data, right? If you just open things up so back in 2017, I was taught that whoever had the most data had the best AI engine. That's evolved into really whoever has the best data has the AI engine, right? Because your data may not be credible. So if you're starting to self-learn as an AI engine by going through Facebook, I would argue that some of the information on Facebook is opinion and not actually fact. So are you learning the right things? So point well taken on the search, but we have to go back to, what is it? Is it good data, right? Is it the best data? And is it really in the end going to give you what you want? And you just have to stick with that,
right? Another thing which is interesting is that a lot of the, I would call it potentially hype, is this notion of conversational AI. Well, it might not be hype, but there is this notion of conversational AI being able to deliver better than human level understanding and better than human experiences. I'm not contesting the fact that conversational AI can deliver better than human experiences. I think it absolutely can. But what you see in the marketplace is that there are a lot of very poor examples of it. And so Caller's question here is that a lot of people are trying to reach customer support, and really they do it because of, in cases, because of frustration, because you're trying to get through, you're trying to say what you want, the system's not understanding you, it's incredibly frustrating, let me just talk to an agent. I would argue that a lot of that is down to very poor implementation, often very poor design. But Caller's question is, realistically, can conversational AI ever be able to incorporate empathy into its design and be able to deliver that kind of human-like experience in an automated conversation? What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'll speak for myself. When I'm super frustrated, it can sometimes feel good to get someone on the phone and tell them how I feel. And venting to a bot is like venting to a brick wall, right? It's just not giving me what I don't feel heard. I'm not healing myself through that process. So there's always going to be a time when you want to yell at someone or you want to feel listened to. Like, these are magical things that people can do when they're together. So there's always a place for that. But if we think about empathy a little differently than just being a sympathetic ear, and if empathy is really best shown by achieving a goal or delivering an outcome, then the most empathetic thing you can do is be fast. I'm sorry you've had to ask 3 times about where your package is. I'm going to make sure you don't have to ask again. So here's a picture on a map of where it is right now. It left the facility at this time. There are 4 stops before it gets to your house, and we think that's going to be around 4:30 today. I'm going to send you a text message at 4:35, and if it's not there, we'll keep talking. That's something a bot can do really well, and faster than a human could. And so maybe that's a different type of empathy, but it's really serving the goal that the end user has in a more, hopefully a more helpful way. So when I hear like better than human experience, I think unfortunately that's often misunderstood as being as conversational and as empathetic as a human can be. I don't think that's the point. I think that can actually really backfire, because pretending to be a human is like infuriating. But if you're able to deliver the outcome faster, that's the best way to, get that user back on track.
And be able to do things that humans would forget to do, like to send in that text message, triggering that text message at 4:30. That happening across thousands of conversations wouldn't be feasible for humans to do, and so in that case, it's definitely better than human experiences. But Tim, do you concur with that? Do people, just because I've worked in government for quite a long time before this, years back, and some people did just want to ring up and just call and just frustrate and vent and stuff like that. But at the same time, people often just want to get a job done. So is it more important to allow people to just get the job done, or is it more important to have a humanish conversation?
Well, I think there's an element of people that are going to want that humanish empathy, like Kevin says, but I'm going to take it from my perspective, which is when I get frustrated and I have to call my company, my vendor, whoever I do business with to solve a problem, I really want the outcome. That's really what I want, because that'll take away my frustration and me having to take time away from what I normally do in life to wait 20 minutes to get someone live or whatever it is. I've actually called the VIP level of a hotel chain that I've been doing business with for years, and had a problem, and I got some great empathy. I'm really sorry. That sounds really frustrating. You're right. And the next words out of their mouth shocked me, which is, I don't have the ability to do that on the system. I'm like, okay, so empathy isn't really helping right now. And I will walk away. If it's done for me, I'm not going to be frustrated. I don't need empathy. If I get empathy, I'm going to feel good for a little bit and then think, okay, I still have to solve this problem. I'm going to start to maybe get a little frustrated again. So I think it has its place, but it's not carte blanche, right? It's like anything. You're getting back to human behavior, right?
And why does it have to be one or the other? A lot of the questions in this chat and elsewhere they use the word versus. What's the benefit of this versus that? And maybe if we're less black and white, we can benefit from those shades of gray. So, Tim, in your example, wouldn't the best case scenario be that person is empathetic and listening and making you feel heard, and then assigning the work to a digital colleague who can now make it better? And so at OneReach, it's human in the loop. It's this acknowledgement that these digital workers aren't handing off a baton to their human colleagues, but they're doing this engagement collaboratively and together.
Interesting.
Because you're really calling to have someone fix your problem or sponsor your issue on behalf of you to get it solved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very similar, I suppose, to the agent assist kind of use case, which is becoming prevalent, where, I suppose one example of agent assist is that the call is happening, the customer's talking to the agent, there's an assistant there listening to the conversation and suggesting ways in which the conversation could be resolved. But the next level of that is that the assistant is there actually doing things on the agent's behalf, exactly as you said, Kevin. This sounds like this customer needs to, in your use case, reset their password. Do you want me to go and do that now? Yes, I do. Okay, and then the bot starts facilitating the conversation while it's getting stuff done, and the agent essentially is it human in the loop? Is it bot in the loop? I don't really know which kind of way around that should be, really. But that's kind of the nirvana, isn't it? Where you have digital workers, digital assistants that are working alongside colleagues, and even in real time, being able to execute service delivery on their behalf. How feasible is that today?
Well, thanks for using that word, feasibility. That's really the main question, I think, behind all of this overpromising. When you go to the big conferences and everyone's drinking Kool-Aid and they have these demos that look like they can do everything, they might be able to, but the amount of development and third-party integrations and other tools that are baked in and kind of hidden is never really talked about. I was at a big conference in California. I'm sure 60,000 other people were there with me. And watching those demos were comical because the amount of development and effort that goes into building that is completely forsaken. Nobody says a word about it, and it makes everybody walk away, essentially in this drunken state of, I'm going to go home and my whole enterprise is going to be transformed, and I'm going to do exactly what that demo just showed, and it's going to be easy, and I'm going to be done quickly, and that's just so wrong. So what do you do about it? I think is maybe a good question to ask. And when you go through and you get all these demos from vendors, that's great. And who knows how much development they've spent on them. The test is to come up with some really challenging functional requirements. We have a template, so reach out to us if you want to use it, that says, show me these things. And don't show me generically in a demo you built for someone else. Build me something for my use case that shows me these things. And our recommendation is that you send that out to your vendors on a Monday morning, and you say demos are Friday afternoon. So you get 5 days, and that removes any ambiguity about what's possible. They can either do it or they can't. And it's not just show me the outcome, but show me how you built this. And in the how you built this demo, if you see a bunch of code everywhere, you're in the wrong place. So that's the only way we can think of to cut through all this overpromising and make vendors really prove what is feasible and what's not.
Absolutely. Is there anything else, Tim, in your experience? Is there anything else? I think that's a really good idea. I think when we spoke on the podcast, you called it a bake-off, which is to give them a scenario, have everybody come and kind of, build something and see who can demonstrate how easy it was to build and what the effectiveness of the solution is. Is there anything else, Tim, in your experience, when it comes to actually procuring technology or finding partners, that's really important to enable you to kind of cut through some of that noise and some of that hype and really get to whether this is really going to be feasible for my business?
Yeah, you have to really gel down to, what's different about you than somebody else doing the same thing or kind of the same thing, right? And, from a standpoint of all these companies, everybody's saying the same thing. So we really try to get into what exactly are you doing? How are you doing it? Are you using your own, say, AI engine or ASR, using somebody else's? Because in some cases, it doesn't make sense to create your own ASR unless it's in the case of the gentleman from Africa, where there's some the best data is in that area where you can create the model correctly, and have the components that can go in and out of your platform. I think another thing from say an enterprise or someone that's looking to deploy this is ask the vendor, do you use it internally? And how many times have you done this? Because again, like whether it be an artist or a chef, when someone says this versus that, well, sweet versus sour, why can't you have both? Maybe that would work for somebody, right? Sweet and sour. And being able to tailor that in an easy fashion for the customer is where the master chef and the low code and environment can come into play. So, to cut through some of the noises, do you use it internally? How do you use it internally? And, how many have you deployed of these? Because the more you've done, the more real world experience you have in really seeing the challenges and things you can fall into, like a caller or someone in a chat getting caught in a trap and they can't get to someone live and they just get really frustrated. So those are two questions I would ask.
Nice. So we've got, do you use this internally? How many of these things have you done in the past? Let's do a bake-off and bring your goodies and see which tastes the best. Anything else to add to that trio, Kevin?
I think that's the recipe right there. If there was one cherry to put on top, I would say it's analytics. It's so incredible how that's often an afterthought. And if you do this right, you're going to be iterating on the experience at an incredibly rapid pace. And the only way to know what to iterate on is by having access to data. So being really making sure that analytics and reporting are on the top of your priority list might be a good way to start.
We did have a question about that from Mike, which is, what do you recommend for continuous improvement of these solutions and analysis of conversational data? So maybe one to build on top of that kind of point of making sure you've got good analytics. What are some of the things typically that you should be looking for in reality when it comes to analyzing these solutions? You mentioned goals earlier on. Is it important to be monitoring the completion of goals? What other things kind of surround that?
Missed intents is really, really critical. Being able to quickly identify patterns of, we'll use COVID as an example. There was a time not too long ago when that word didn't exist. And then all of a sudden it came into the world pretty quickly and people were asking questions about it. And if you don't have the tools to be able to identify emerging patterns and missed intents quickly, you're going to end up, in a bit of a jam.
Interesting. Yeah, it's crazy times. I think we've gone through. I think this conversation could be. I think every point we've made, we could have had a conversation about every single one of these for about an hour, because it is so deep, and it's no wonder why people get confused, really, because even this conversation, we've touched on so many different topics. We've gone here, there, and everywhere. We've gone from high level kind of business validation down to practical implementation, to low code, to vetting vendors, to over promising and what's real. I mean, the space is just so crazy. It's interesting. That's what keeps me kind of interested and locked into it, is because it's moving all the time, it's changing all the time. It's so interesting. But I think being able to understand what's actually feasible and what the reality of it is hugely important. Tim, any kind of parting bits of advice that you could give for those that are maybe in a position where they know they've got a business need, they are considering, conversational automation, they're taking on board everything that we've been discussing today. Any kind of bits of advice that you would leave them with? What steps should they be taking next?
Yeah, it depends on where you are on the curve. I would say if you're just learning, there's plenty of places to learn. But if you're a little more in the medium, kind of understand it and trying to identify solutions, it's look for, what are the easiest things to automate? Go back to the basics, right? We've got live agents, and they have and the reason live agents are so great is because it's human interaction, and they usually have some kind of context, right? They may get to know you over time and understand part of your history, and you want to save them for the real high value interaction. So when you want to automate it, look for rudimentary tasks, things that happen a lot that are very simple, and look for that kind of area in order to call in a vendor and, pick, 2 or 3 of the more reputable ones and say, okay, and go through Kevin's checklist, right? And ask some of the questions when they're there, because, they're the experts, right? They live and breathe this stuff, and you can usually sort out someone as you peel through you got 5 days and show me something that fits my business, and the number of deployments of whether it's a lot of slideware or whether they really are, an artist or a master chef or someone who can really put it together on your behalf to give you what you want.
Kevin, what do you think? Any kind of parting bits of advice that we haven't touched on already for those that are considering conversational automation?
Have a high bar for your vendors. Make them work. Make them prove some of these concepts, not just talk about them. Nice. And then don't be afraid to start internally. There's a lot of use cases that you can deploy to enhance your own team and your own employee experience that are a great way to get started, kind of get you on the racetrack, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a low risk environment that as well, isn't it? You can test, you can experiment, you can gain stakeholder internal support for this kind of stuff. And you can do that with relatively low cost as well, especially if you've got some skills internally. You don't need to necessarily go and spend a fortune on a platform to do that. You can get started fairly quickly and fairly cheaply. One thing I would add to that is, for those tuning in who are considering it, is it's almost a word of warning, but it's almost a bit of grounding as well, which is be prepared for this to be something that you just do from now on. It's not something that you're going to do once and it's going to be fire and forget and it's going to solve all your problems and it's just going to be like launching a website and you click go and it's all done. This is something that you need to build your capabilities in, you need to build your skills in, you need to build understanding of, and it's not something that is ever going to stop. To use your language, Kevin, to implement digital workers, excuse me, there will become a point, I believe at least, where the front end of your business on every customer touch point will be mediated by a conversational AI assistant. Many of your internal business processes will be mediated by an AI assistant. And in your personal life, much of what you engage with on a daily basis will be mediated by a conversational AI of some description. And so it's only going to get kind of more prevalent to the point where it becomes essentially the business, so to speak. And so a little kind of bit of grounding is that you don't have to start big, you don't have to invest heavily straight away, but be in it for the long haul. Don't think it's a very quick thing that you're going to do in 6 weeks and be done with it. Because to use your language again, Kevin and Tim, it is a journey. And when you start that journey, you need to be prepared to continue it.
And the status quo is that sentence. I think that's the last thing. Like, this is happening. It's time to start. If you don't mind, I'll do a kind of a shameless plug, but our founder published a book recently called Age of Invisible Machines, and it's full of just really practical, down to earth tips and tricks for how to be successful here. And it also does reinforce this idea that the train has left the station. And if you're not on it, you're organizationally, you're going to be a lot less competitive than you might realize at the moment.
100%. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, Kevin and Tim. It's been a pleasure. For those of you still tuning in, do join us next week in Arlington at the Voice Summit. VUX at Voice 22 is going to have a whole room dedicated to contact center automation. Vonage are a main partner. They're going to be doing an immense panel discussion there. And also Vonage and the team right here, Kevin and Tim, we're going to be on the main stage as well, continuing this discussion and getting into a little bit more detail. So if you're going to be at Voice 22, do join us for that talk. Check out the agenda at voicesummit.ai. And if you can also tune in virtually as well, by the way, if you're not going to be there in person, you can tune in virtually, voicesummit.ai. Definitely check out vonage.com. Definitely go to onereach.ai. Check out that book. I would 110% recommend that book. If you buy one book this year, I would recommend Rob Wilson's book because it is genuinely fantastic. And if you feel compelled to do so, you can subscribe to VUX World at vux.world/subscribe. And the sessions like this that we do with partners like Vonage and OneReach, you will get all of the invites to those sessions as and when they arrive, which is thick and fast. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry if we didn't get through all of the questions there, but hopefully we have successfully demystified conversational AI. And we'll see you on the next one.